Filipinos are everywhere. That is not news. But of course, there are many initiatives as well to build strong Filipino communities abroad. Case in point, we now speak to Brendan Flores, President of the National Federation of Filipino American Associations, or NaFFAA. Good evening, Brendan. Welcome to the Chiefs.
Good evening.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. First of all, am I pronouncing that right? NaFFAA? How do you call it?
The first one, it's NaFFA.
NaFFA. Okay. Now, tell us about NaFFA, and more importantly, tell us about, well, this very big community that you're trying to represent.
Yeah, so NaFFA, or the National Federation of Filipino American Associations, it is the largest Filipino American organization in the U.S. With this very immense responsibility to really bring and unite and of course empower, right, the 4 million diverse voices of Filipinos and Filipino Americans living in the United States. We focus on 3 specific pillars, and that's on leadership development, civic engagement, and advocacy. You know, I don't know if you're aware, but Filipinos are the 3rd largest Asian American group in the United States, consisting over close to 4.5 million across, again, the 50 states in the U.S.
Yeah, we are, of course, very much aware. We're also very much aware Filipino is one of the fastest growing ethnic languages in many states on both coasts. But tell us, what has actually changed with the Filipino American community, say, from the generation of Ed to your generation now?
You know, I think a lot of it is we're seeing a lot of collaboration, right? As a matter of fact, just recently during the midterm election, we saw over 40 Filipino Americans elected to office. And what's exciting for me is seeing also younger people getting involved. We had almost a dozen Gen Z and millennials elected to office. The other thing from a diversity standpoint, about 20 plus, are women. And again, to me, that signifies that Filipinos are making a name for themselves and not afraid to enter politics or other critical jobs or professions in the United States. So I think we're seeing, again, a big difference on that space.
Are Filipinos in the U.S. following closely what's happening in the Philippines? Because I'm sure you're aware of the dramatic developments last year in the country.
You know, I think you can't take that away, especially for our older Filipino Americans, right? Our Filipinos living in the U.S. I think there is a huge attachment to the motherland, especially when it comes to politics. I hear it. You know, as national chairman of the organization, you have pro-administration. You have folks that are, not really too happy about what's going on in the Philippines. But I think many of them, outside of just politics, they're very much engaged or entrenched in what's happening in terms of, economic growth or support for their family members, especially during disasters, right? Since the Philippines always get hit in some kind of disasters, whether it's a typhoon or earthquake. So I think a lot of emphasis on that outside of the Philippine politics.
What about the younger generation? Are they still interested in the motherland? Do they consider the Philippines the motherland?
You know, you'd be very surprised. Yes, I would say, look, there's over 4.5 million Filipino Americans, right? So I can't say all, 50% of them are so invested. I think, one, for those folks who are not invested, I think it's a matter of not having enough visibility or education about the motherland, right? And for those folks who have the opportunity to have a lot more visibility, they definitely do. I mean, there's a lot of programs happening in the United States where they're bringing young Filipino Americans to the Philippines to experience what it's like, to connect with, with the community, with the business owners. And I'm proud to say, I mean, in different states in the U.S., you have a lot of organizations pushing for Filipino curriculum, right? Because to your point, we have a lot of folks who would want to learn about their culture and their heritage and their history, of course. And that I see a lot of that happening for sure.
But how difficult is it for the younger generation to relate to what's happening in the Philippines? I mean, of course, in the U.S., you have a lot of issues there yourself. You have politics, you have racial issues, and so on down the line. So I'm just wondering how difficult or easy it is for the younger generation to be able to relate to a country and a culture half a world away.
I think it's case by case. I think that's the power of social media, right? I mean, these young folks have access to everything, whether it's TikTok or Facebook or Instagram, or their parents. So I think they're definitely in the know. Again, I'm not going to say it's everyone, I think, but the majority are aware of what's going on, and they relate because there's a lot of things that are happening very similar in the United States, whether it's Asian hate, right? Whether it's a lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think there's again, a lot of similarities between the United States and in the Philippines. So you got these young folks who are a lot more, I think I'm seeing a lot more activism with young people, which I think is a good thing because they want to have a voice, they want to be heard, and because of so much access, they have the ability to know exactly what's going on across the globe.
Brendan, and then I do agree with you, and certainly everybody will agree that linkages need not just be based on politics, need not just be based on even on history, not even just based on family, as important as it is for Filipinos. We can be linked as well with opportunities. We can be linked as well in terms of investments, business. You mentioned a lot of innovators among Filipino Americans there. We have a very vibrant startup community in the Philippines as well. I'm wondering if you're actively building these linkages, especially between innovative, enterprising young Filipinos in the United States and innovative, enterprising young Filipinos back here in the motherland.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of that, and we have a partner organization. It's the Philippine American Chamber of Commerce, right? And they do a lot of events between the U.S. and the Philippines, attracting, Filipino Americans or other investors to come to the Philippines and invest. As a matter of fact, not only that we're the third largest Asian American group in population, but also buying power, right? Accounting for 146 billion, right, or 14.4% of the market, and that's significant. I think because seeing that wealth, I mean, you see a lot of younger and older generations expanding, right, their portfolio, and many of them coming to the motherland and starting, to your point, new businesses.
Brendan, you mentioned Asian hate crimes. Several Filipinos have been targeted as well, right? And I think there have been deaths. Can you update us on what's happening?
Yeah, unfortunately, it is a big case in the U.S. and I wish I can say it's going to stop eventually. But as an organization and really the Filipino American community, we continue to fight for racial profiling and Asian hate, right? So a lot of that has to do with education and self-protection or self-defense. I mean, I'm sure you all have heard several incidents that took place over the past couple of years. A man in New York getting slashed, right? His face, right? Because of Asian hate. So as the Filipino American community, we're in tune with what's going on. And what we're doing is just really connecting between organizations to provide resources or support. We're also partnering with other Asian American groups to combat Asian hate. And then, of course, with government support, that's also something of critical. And we do the same exact thing in terms of partnerships and providing resources across the country.
Is the Filipino American community satisfied with the U.S. law enforcement response to the problem?
I would say no, right? Because I think it's continuing to happen, and it's not just for the Filipino Americans. I think it's the broader AAPI, or the Asian American Pacific Islander group. I mean, just recently, again, it's not specific to Filipino, but other incidents are definitely occurring. So I think we have some of our kababayans kind of losing hope, right? Is this, how long is this going to continue? It's unfortunate, right? And I think in terms of the support from, the police officers, I think they're doing what they can. But again, it's a big issue across the country, right? It's very divisive, and we're seeing a lot of those coming up.
What would you like to see by way of government action? What more can the U.S. do? Federal, local? What would you like to see?
I think I'm speaking for a lot of Filipino Americans and other Asian Americans. I think strengthening safety and security measures, right, for our kababayans, for the AAPI community, and really taking it very seriously. It has to be a huge offense. And in fairness to the administration and other folks, I mean, they've done a lot, right? But I think we need to continue that and remove the perception that, you know, Asian Americans or Filipinos are just visiting the United States. No, we're part of the American fabric. And a lot of it, too, I think it goes back to education, right? They need to teach the importance of Asian American history, for me, particularly Filipino American history, because some folks may not be aware, right? And we also need to ensure that we're electing politicians who care about diversity, right? And who's not going to be polarized or divisive between communities. And I think a lot of that happens in the U.S., where you elect someone who, you know, only cares about a certain group. And it can't be like that, because we're a melting pot in the United States, and we need people who act and think like that.
Brendan, you mentioned Filipinos being part of the fabric of America. And certainly, despite all of these challenges and problems, Filipinos continue to go where opportunities or even challenges may lie. You are president of NaFFAA, that's the National Federation of Filipino American Associations. We of course always go for the low hanging. We mentioned East Coast, West Coast, but tell us about your member associations, and in particular, are there regions, are there states that we don't traditionally think about that you might actually surprise our viewers with, that, you know, that the community is actually quite active or burgeoning, maybe even in some of states that could surprise some people?
Yeah, you know, and I get the opportunity to understand data, right? Or research data, rather. And the Filipino population is continuing to grow. And I think what's the beautiful thing about our culture, we assimilate very quickly, right? Kind of like where you go ever, you see a lot of Chinatown. And now for me, I'm seeing more Filipinos wherever I go. And I travel across the United States to meet with our communities. And to your point, it's not just in New York or in Honolulu or in Los Angeles and San Diego or you know, in big metropolitan cities. But I'm even seeing Filipinos in Missouri, right? Or in the South, where I live in Florida. You would think there aren't that many Filipinos in Florida alone, the state of Florida, which is a very conservative state. Over 150, 160,000 Filipinos. In Las Vegas, where I grew up, it is now the largest Asian American group, right? And as a matter of fact, second largest immigrant group after Mexicans. So as you can imagine, again, you know, the Filipino population is continuing to grow, not just in big cities, but even in small towns. And certainly we're seeing that in politics, in entertainment, and other critical professions.
Well, we also know that you're visiting here. Could you tell us why you're here? What are your objectives?
Yeah, you know, the last time I came back home was a little over a decade ago. I've been busy. And I wanted just to see the country, you know, how much it has changed over the last decade, because I haven't been back. And obviously my parents are from Calapan, Oriental Mindoro, right? Mm-hmm. And I have a grandmother who lives there, who moved from Lake Tahoe, California. So I wanted to also see her. But the other part of it is really meeting with several government officials to talk about different things, whether it's bilateral relations, immigration, protecting our Filipino nurses and teachers in the U.S. We're also having different conversations about investments and businesses. I think to one of your questions earlier, you know, how are young people getting engaged? And as a national federation in the U.S., we have, you know, hundreds of member organizations across, again, the 50 states that we represent. So it's important for us to ensure that there is a strong partnership between the Filipino American community and the government here, or different business investors to keep that growing, because we are invested in seeing this country grow because we have that attachment. This is our motherland, and we also want to help and support.
So how much has the country changed? Are we growing fast enough? Are we growing? Are we becoming better?
You know, I can't, from my perspective, and I don't want to speak for other folks. You know, it's my second day in the Philippines. I flew to Manila, and I'm
That's
super
long
jet
enough
lagged.
to have an opinion.
No, 2 days. But I am paying attention. I do follow what's going on in the Philippines, and I flew into Palawan earlier this morning, right? So I haven't. I'm quite exhausted.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I had dinner in BGC. I didn't know what BGC was.
Yeah.
And I remember, close to 15 years ago, it wasn't fully developed. And it's to me, it's just fascinating to see the growth of the Philippines, particularly in that area. It looks like Singapore or some metro city in the United States. So to me, that makes me feel proud. But then at the same time, you look, behind that, you still see a lot of poverty, right? So that to me still is a concern. Well, you have this facade that we're growing, but what are we really doing behind the scenes? And one thing that didn't change is traffic. I mean, I was in traffic for a couple of hours, so that part I absolutely did not miss. But I think we're growing. I think we're growing positively. But the question is sustainability.
Okay. Now, hey, Brendan, final question. When your American friends ask you about the Philippines, and I'm not talking about Filipino Americans, obviously, but when your friends, associates in America ask you about the Philippines, what do they ask? What do they want to know or understand?
Yeah, good question. So I actually brought 2 of my Caucasian friends to the Philippines. And the first question that they ask is, the Philippines safe? Right? That always comes up for non-Filipino friends. The other thing is the Philippines develop, right? Do they have the infrastructure? And third, and this is, I think, unfortunately, obviously, it's in the media. Do they have a lot of killings in the Philippines? I think that's fresh in people's mind, right? Outside of the exciting things that's happening in different islands across the country, and the tours, I think those are primary concerns and questions that do come up in almost every conversation.
Wait,
So I
how do
think
you
we got
answer
to
them?
change that narrative.
How do you answer the question?
Yes, yes, yes. That's a yes, and a yes.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Well, anyway, Brendan Flores, a pleasure speaking with you. Welcome back. Enjoy your time, and good luck on your mission. Brendan Flores is president of the National Federation of Filipino American Associations, or NaFFAA. Maraming salamat, Brendan.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.